We've got new information about the Roger Pirates, as well as a brand new member of the Rocks Pirates, the inspiration behind Scopogaban, Dr. Vegapunk's cousin, Dr. Vegapants, a lot of information and statements about Panty and Panty-adjacent topics in general, and all of this comes to us courtesy of the SBS of Volume 112. If you're new to the SBS segments, then welcome. You're in for a ride today, because these are essentially segments where One Piece manga readers get to ask author Eiichiro Oda questions. Some of which are extremely plot relevant and others are, well, you'll see. And these questions and answers have been translated by the Library of Ohara, the Will of Marco, and Inumaru8 on Twitter. So thank you so much to all of them, and let's get into it. As something quite fascinating in this SBS is that Oda revealed the official roles of Roger's crew, which is interesting to compare with the roles of the Straw Hats, but also includes a ton of weird stuff that I was not expecting. So we have the standard roles, of course. We knew that Roger was the captain, Silver Israeli was the vice captain, Scopogaban was the navigator, and Crocus was the doctor. However, just on Crocus, what we now know is that he is the only doctor that's ever been listed for the Roger Pirates, which is relevant because Crocus joined the crew exceptionally late. Crocus was only with them for the last 3 years of their journey, so the Roger Pirates apparently spent almost 3 decades together without a doctor, which is absolutely insane, but what they did have is as follows. The helmsman of the Oro Jackson was Don Kino, the gunner was Peter Moo, the shipwright was Blue Marine, their musician was Jackson Banner, who reminds me a lot of Brooke in terms of the sheer joy he seems to embody with or without a body, and perhaps most interestingly, the Roger Pirates also had a scholar, which was rowing, and so I have to wonder if this dude was a scholar of Ohara. I mean, they're not the only islands that produces scholars, I think. But in the story of One Piece, the word scholar is associated pretty much exclusively with Ohara. And I guess it would explain how the Roger Pirates knew so much about all of the history initially. But in addition to these classic Straw Hat roles, Roger's crew had some more diverse specialists, such as Tactical Staff Officer Moon Isaac Jr., indicating that the Roger Pirates had a much more organized and almost military-esque approach to conflict, which makes sense because there were approximately 30 people on the crew at any given time. So at that point, you would need this kind of middle management role just to organize all your dudes. But 2 more intriguing roles aboard the Roger Pirates belong to Spencer, the intelligence officer, and Elio, the informant. Now, the former role of intelligence is not unprecedented. We've had intelligence officers featured within the crews of Emperors of the Sea, and they're charged with acquiring information from the opposing factions. However, the informant role held by Elio is a bit more puzzling, and I suppose may imply that he spent quite a bit of time away from the Roger Pirates, gathering informations to report back to them, or even that he was a more Rockstar kind of recruit. Rockstar being the most recent member of the Red Hair Pirates, and his role is sort of like a messenger pigeon for Shanks. However, the most unexpected role is this next one. It belongs to Mille Pine, seen here in this photo running away naked from a giant and also naked Catman. And if we zoom in on the most curious parts of a man, we see that Mille Pine is lacking the meat and veg that we would typically expect to see in that position. Anyway, Mille Pine was the crew torturer, which is such an extremely dark role, but not at all inconsistent with the realities of piracy. So the Roger Pirates, they were the real deal. They weren't just a bunch of kids fighting for their dreams on the open seas. Nah, mate. They were proper pirates who, at times, were perhaps worthy of all of the fear-mongering generated around them. So those are the only revealed crew roles, which is interesting because the Roger Pirates do have about 20 other crew members. But what surprises me most is that there is no identified cook, which seems like a pretty important role, which led to this meme on the internet featuring the Roger Pirates performing a variation of the Alabaster Salute, rejecting Zeph as a crew member because apparently no one needs a cook or a doctor. And just before we move away from the Roger Pirates, we also have another fun revelation, which is Oda stating that Scopogaban's name was apparently taken from the French actor Jean Gabin. Oda stated, "I've always loved old movies, and sometimes I borrow names from the actors in the past. And not only that, but sometimes he just borrows full-on people, such as the designs of all of the Marine Admirals being based on classic Japanese actors. But in the case of Jean Gabin, I think it is just the name though, or at the very least I can't find anything else that's inspired the character of Scopogaban, with the one maybe exception of Gabin's parallels to Sanji. Sanji's real-world nationality is of course French, so it makes some spiritual sense for his Roger Pirate equivalent to also have French origins, and also as a result of this, this Twitter did a bit of a funny. With Scopogaban being French, one user stated, that explains why he surrenders every chapter. Question: is the man who appeared in sunglasses in chapter 1096 Gil Bastar? So this question is a reference to this group shot of the Rocks Pirates. There's a close-up panel in the bottom left-hand corner of this dude with some sunglasses, and as for who Gil Bastar is, well, I'll just let Oda explain. Gil Bastar is the protagonist of a manga I wrote when I was 17. How did you notice it was him, lol? Anyway, the corpse of Gil Bastar, who pertained to the Rocks Pirates, was retrieved by Gecko Moria, so he also appears in chapter 450 during the Thriller Bark arc. But don't worry if you didn't notice this detail. So this is pretty huge because that is another confirmed Rocks Pirates member, and it also means that in addition to Monsters, which featured Ryuma as the main character, Oda's one-shot Wanted is now part of the official One Piece canon, with Gil Buster being a man who had a bounty of 970 million berries, and after his death, his corpse was acquired by Gecko Moria, and he became one of Moria's zombie generals, many of whom are also Rocks Pirates members. I have a whole video on that, either elsewhere on this channel or about to come out on the channel, because it turns out that Gecko Moria had the corpses of at least 6 Rocks Pirates, and he was essentially trying to overthrow Kaido with the power of Kaido's former crew. Question: Adachi, in the Elbaf arc, those strange animals from the movie Strong World keep on appearing. I really love the idea of them being incorporated into the main story. Alright, so just in case you haven't seen One Piece Strong World, this was the first One Piece film where Eiichiro Oda wrote the story and contributed heavily in most creative fields, including designing all of the animals, who were genetically enhanced with rapid evolution and going to be used by the fiendish Golden Lion Shiki to destroy the East Blue, because Shiki was very upset that Roger was executed in such a weak sea. Pretty good movie and very cool animal designs, and so they were one of the first things that we noticed about Elbaf. All of these Strong World creatures were present on this island as well. You can see a ton of them in chapter 1131. They're the group of monstrous creatures that instantly make friends with Luffy and then later go on to be defeated by Gunko and Shamrock. And seeing them here was very cool because it led to the speculation that this is what became of Shiki's plan. Because the confusing thing about Shiki is that Strong World itself isn't canon, but his plan to rapidly evolve the animals is canon because it was in chapter 0. So my thinking was that someone else had stopped Shiki, and the solution for all of the animals he created was to plonk them on Elbaf, because there is no better place for creatures bred for battle than Warland. But Oda has now given us the official explanation for why all of the same animals are on Elbaf. He essentially states that his task was to design what animals would look like in a world governed entirely by strength, and that ended up being practically the same design brief as the concept for Strong World. So he reused his already existing animals and insists that it's not just because he couldn't be bothered to come up with something new. Question: Vegapunk's cousin Vegapants lives in Pants Hazard, but what kind of island is it, and what type of person is he? So what we have here is a long-standing tradition of readers making up characters, insisting that they're canon, and seeing how Oda responds. And in this case, he replies with, "You knew about that island, huh? Vegapants is the son of the younger brother of Vegapunk's father, who lives on an island south of Baltimore called Pants Hazard, an island where the locals have the cultural tradition of wearing female underwear or panties on their heads. Although they are known for being earnest and diligent, the island itself is cut off from the rest of the world. That sure brings back some memories." So there you have it. Vegapants is now canon, as is the island of Pants Hazard, which Oda has gone to some pretty great lengths to illustrate for us, considering that this is an SBS segment. And the island obviously looks a lot like Egghead, just with Punk Records being replaced by what I suppose is Pants Records. And just a slight note on translation, this gag is a lot funnier in Japanese, because the word for underwear being used here is pantsu, so you've got Dr. Vegapunku and Vegapantsu. So it sounds a lot more natural, and I think this is a joke based on the observation that all the women on Egghead Island were always drawn without pants, leading to the idea that Vegapunk has an obsession with women's underwear, hence he becomes Dr. Vegapantsu, but Vegapants turns out to be a completely separate character. Although the panty obsession clearly runs in the family. Or does it? Because we are not done with the panty-based questioning in this SBS just yet. Question: why is Gunko walking around in her panties? Well, I keep getting comments like it's panties this and panties that, but listen, it's technically underwear, but if we call it that, then that would make Gunko some kind of pervert. And just as a side note, I guess that's kind of like how Frankie is considered to be a pervert for walking around in Speedos. That's not the case at all. You know Nami and Bonnie's outfits on Egghead? It's a fashion where the hems of their jacket jackets are extended. In fact, it reduces the amount of skin that's being exposed. So that outfit is totally fine. How rude. So here I think Oda is suggesting that Gunko, Nami, and Bonnie were all wearing something more akin to a one-piece bathing suit. But also, don't take any of that too seriously, because to me, it reads more like Vegapants trying to make an excuse for his research interests. And just in case you were under any other impression for whatever reason, Oda is a loud and proud pervert, and the SBS segments often end up geared in that direction. Because remember that Oda is the one who chooses which questions to answer, and definitely keep that in mind as we move to this next question. Every time I finish reading One Piece, my mind is full of Nami and her boobs. So it's more of a statement than a question, and the statement was made by a man named Sanada. Sanada is a frequent character who pops up not so much to ask questions, but more so to make statements such as submitting a request for Nami's used bath towels or stating his desire to be stepped on by Komurasaki. And crazily enough, in the real world, Sanada also has a Guinness World Record for the largest collection of One Piece merchandise, which consists of exactly 5,656 pieces. So he has a Gomu Gomu number of merch. But in any case, Oda's response to this statement was pretty much the same as every other time. Shut up, Sanada! And this is a bit of an ongoing subplot within the SBS sections, as another force that occasionally pops up is the self-proclaimed SBS Disciplinary Committee. They send in questions, mostly asking for Sanada to be punished for his questions. But they didn't make it into this particular volume, so Sanada got away with it this time around. Question. Hello, Adachi-san. Because Ripley and Gerd are giants, are their cup sizes W, as in World Cup? And Oda then answers this question by going on a bit of a detailed calculated breast size rant before stating that, yes, the cup size of every female giant is 0. They are all World Cups. Question. The pirate crew that appears in chapter 1122, are they that legendary pirate crew? Alright, so this is one of the most obscure references that you will ever find in One Piece. The reader is referring to these 3 pirates who are inspired to go after the One Piece after Vegapunk's message more or less confirms that yes, it does exist, and whoever claims it will have the power to alter the world. But these 3 guys were actually designed by not just Eiichiro Oda, but also his mentor Nobuhiro Watsuki, the author of Rurouni Kenshin, and Hiroyuki Takei, the author of Shaman King. Together they are called the Endurance Curry Pirates, and they were designed for a Shonen Jump fan contest in the year 2000. Basically, readers had to submit their own made-up 3-person crews that would do battle with one another, and the winning team would then go on to face the Endurance Curry Pirates. And if they won, then they would receive a special illustration from Oda, which they did. The finalist team, named Bakudan, did end up beating the Endurance Curry Pirates according to the 100 ability point assignment system, but now these guys are a fully fledged part of One Piece canon. Question. Hello, Oda-san. What are the Dosen Dada tribe? Are they a mixed race of giants and dwarves? Or maybe even ancient giants and dwarves? This question is a reference to chapter 1139, where the missionary of love, Skopagaban, claims that love has resulted in many mixed races throughout history, naming a lot that we know, but also one that we had never heard of, being the Dosen Dada. And here Eiichiro Oda clarifies that the Dosen Dada are a mix between humans and dwarves, which we do have one example of, being Charlotte Normand, but Oda also goes on to state that there is another race mixed between giants and dwarves who are called the Zushindoro, and that they are extremely rare. And here's a bit of a Japanese thing that's happening here with ton, dosen, and zushin. Those are the sounds of increasingly larger footsteps. So you've got the smallest of them, the Tontada tribe, who have the ton sound for the teeny tiny footsteps. Then there's our mix of humans and dwarves, the Dosen Dada, and they have the dosen, which are the louder footsteps. And finally, we have the giant dwarf hybrids, the Zushindoro, who have zushin, the sound of the loudest footsteps. And all of this has resulted in the speculation that Usopp's mother, Banchina, may have been a Dosen Dada, because her nose is extremely similar to the noses possessed by the Tontada tribe, and hence the newfound theory that Usopp is part Tontada. But following this, a reader writes in confirming that Imu's first-person pronoun is mu. And this is something kind of important that doesn't really come across in the English translation. In Japanese, whenever Imu says I, he uses a unique pronoun, which is mu. So it's always like, mu wants this and mu wants that. And in English, sometimes they replace the word me with mu in order to indulge in this, but the general idea just gets a little bit lost in translation. Anyway, Mu is just the last character of Imu's name, so in this SBS, a reader suggests that Oda's first-person pronoun should be da, and that together Imu and Oda become Muda, which is the Japanese word for futile and pointless, as any diligent JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fans will know. Question. Hello, Oda-sensei. I am a boy who's about to enter middle school, and I'm hooked on One Piece right now. My dad owns up to volume 82 of the manga, and I have been reading them. I want him to buy volume 83 onwards, but do you have a good strategy to suggest for that? Please teach me. So this right here, this is Oda's target audience. One Piece has of course evolved into this massive entity that bypasses the concept of demographics, but whenever he draws, Oda makes the story with Japanese teenage boys in mind. So of course he has a strategy ready and waiting to be used here. You should go with the quote shoulder massage strategy. There's no parent who wouldn't be happy getting a massage from their child, and volume 82 is exactly where Momonosuke vows to avenge his father. So once your dad's shoulders and heart has softened, you should say, "Father, I want to defeat Kaido." That should do the trick. And I think that that answer is just diabolical. Because if I was a parent and my child told me that they wanted to beat Kaido, I think that would be the proudest moment of my life. And as is tradition with every new One Piece volume, Oda has also left us a panda surprise. The cover of volume 112 is pretty cool in general. I really like the shape that Luffy's forming with his arms, and with the new giant warrior pirates and Saul all sticking their heads in a huddle. But I would like to direct your attention to Saul and Robin, as when you take off the dust jacket of the volume, Nico Robin turns into Panda Man, or maybe in this case it's Panda Woman. We haven't seen her in a while, but there he, she, or it is. And that is all the new information from volume 112, although there is one other pretty extremely important factor that was revealed, which is the lineage of Gunko, a topic so important that I've made a whole video of its own to cover, which I highly recommend checking out here.